"Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move. He's platinum." He, meaning the white man who had just stepped on the plane 10 minutes late, holding nothing but a phone and a smirk. And she, the black woman in seat 3C who had boarded early, smiled politely and never raised her voice, was now being told her seat didn't matter, even though she paid for it, even though her name was on the ticket, even though she earned it. She looked up, calm, and said 5 words. "You don't know who I am." 12 minutes later, the woman who tried to remove her was removed herself, fired, right there, before the plane ever left the ground. And that's just the beginning, because this isn't just a story about a seat. It's about power, respect, and what happens when the system finally meets the woman it underestimated. But before we dive in, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from? Are you on a walk? At home with your coffee? On a bus? Or maybe a plane? Wherever you are, make sure you subscribe, because stories like this, they're not just meant to be heard. They're meant to be felt. Now, let's begin. Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, Gate B18, 8:05 a.m., Flight 1820 to San Francisco. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stand up." The voice cut through the low hum of boarding chatter like a sharp knife against fabric. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had that tone. Renee Collins didn't move. She sat in seat 3C, third row of the business class cabin, black blazer, light gray turtleneck, no jewelry beyond a slim wedding band. Her carry-on was tucked neatly under the seat ahead, boarding pass folded into the seat back in front of her. Phone on airplane mode. She looked up slowly. Standing over her was a young flight attendant, no older than 26, blonde bun tight as her expression. "I'm sorry?" Renee said, calm and composed. "This section is for business class passengers only," the attendant said. "You must have taken a wrong turn during boarding." A man across the aisle in 3D looked up from his newspaper, watching. A woman in 2B tilted her phone toward them subtly. Her camera was already recording. Renee blinked once. Then, without raising her voice, she reached toward the seat pocket and removed her boarding pass. "Freeze," she said, holding it up. "Boarded 5 minutes ago." The flight attendant didn't look at the ticket. She folded her arms. "We've had a few mix-ups this morning. You may have scanned someone else's." "I scanned mine." The flight attendant's name tag read Olivia. She glanced down the aisle, then back at Renee, lowering her voice just slightly. "Business class on this flight is limited to titanium or executive status. Are you sure you didn't mean to book economy comfort?" The woman in 4A muttered, "Oh my God," but didn't speak up. A pause. Then Renee reached slowly into her bag and pulled out her ID and a digital card. No words, no announcement, just placed them on the tray table. Driver's license, boarding pass, Renee Collins, Collins Equity Group Executive Tier, status, black card member. Still, Olivia didn't touch them. "Ma'am," she said, "I'm going to need to verify this with the gate." "You haven't looked at it yet." "I said I need to verify it." Renee leaned back slightly. Her voice was calm, controlled. "I'm not moving from a seat I paid for, boarded with, and have a documented assignment too." The tension around them was silent but heavy. Not a single crew member stepped forward, not one passenger said a word. But 6 phones were already recording. Lila Monroe, seat 5A, black woman in her 30s, was holding hers just below eye level. She had already started whispering to her live stream. "I'm at gate B18, ATL," she whispered. "Black woman in business class just got asked to prove she belongs." "They didn't even look at her ticket," the man in 3D cleared his throat. "Just let her sit, for God's sake." But Olivia pressed on. "Ma'am, if you won't move, I will have to request that security assist." That was when Renee's phone buzzed, once quiet against the seat armrest. She didn't check it right away. She simply reached for it, unlocked it with her finger, and read the message. It was from Monica. Boardroom's full? They're waiting? Protocol R3, ma'am. Renee let out a quiet breath, then finally looked up at Olivia again. You know what time it is? Renee asked, voice low. What? It's 8:05 a.m. That means I've been in this seat for 7 minutes. I boarded ahead of schedule, followed every instruction, showed zero disruption. You've now questioned my status 3 times, refused to check my documents, and threatened security. Olivia shifted, clearly uncomfortable now. I'm just doing my job. No, you're doing something else, Renee said, cutting her off gently. You're enforcing an assumption. The aisle went quieter. Even the murmurs had stopped. Then Olivia turned away and spoke into her headset, voice clipped. Passenger verification request at seat 3C. Can we get a supervisor to B18, please? Renee reached down and zipped her bag slowly, deliberately. The woman in 4A leaned forward. Excuse me, she said, loud enough for others to hear, but I saw her boarding pass. She's right where she's supposed to be. Olivia ignored her. And just like that, the energy in the cabin shifted. A sense of shame crept in, but it wasn't directed at Renee. A few more phones lifted. Mrs. Gladys, row 6A, deep brown skin, silver curls under a velvet beret, spoke just once. I been on this earth 72 years, she said. Ain't nothing new here. But that don't mean it don't still burn. That line made it onto 4 different TikToks before the flight even left the gate. A minute later, a man in a cheap blue blazer arrived from the jet bridge. Raymond Pierce, gate supervisor. He took one look at Renee's ID, boarding pass, and membership card. Then he asked Olivia a single question. You didn't check this? Olivia's answer was a mumble. I assumed. Renee finally stood, not to argue, not to leave, just to stretch, slowly, deliberately, and then sit back down, facing forward, hands folded in her lap. The briefest smile tugged at the edge of her mouth, because behind that calm was calculation, and behind the humiliation was authority. That 12-minute countdown had just begun. Flight 182811 Naimim. The seatbelt sign hadn't even turned on, but the temperature in the business class cabin had shifted. Not physically, socially. There was a tightness in the air now, like people were holding their breath without meaning to. Olivia had retreated halfway down the aisle, pretending to check storage bins, but everyone could see her hands trembling slightly when she reached for the overhead latch above 6B and didn't open it. Renee hadn't moved. She sat straight-backed in 3C, eyes on her screen, fingers gliding across her phone with the quiet precision of someone very much in control. No words, no glances, just stillness. But people were watching. The man in 3D, Mark Ellison, navy suit, silver cufflinks, and the kind of watch that was meant to be seen, pretended to read again, but his eyes kept flicking sideways toward her. Behind them, whispers buzzed like static. Was that about race? Someone said. Why didn't she raise her voice? I think she's someone important. Did you see the way she sat back down? From 5A, Leela Monroe was still recording, quietly, like a documentarian watching the final seconds before something shifted in history. She zoomed in on Renee's phone screen for just a moment and caught a glimpse. Secure folder access, Collins Equity Group, board override permission, Tier 1 initiated. She blinked, whispered to herself, Wait, Collins? But the name hadn't fully registered yet. Further back, a mother and daughter exchanged glances. The girl, maybe 12, leaned in toward her mother and whispered, Is she famous? Her mother's reply came without hesitation. No, baby, she said, still watching Renee. She's something more than famous. At the front of the cabin, the purser, a tall man named Gerald, whispered to Olivia as she returned to the galley. What the hell just happened? Olivia whispered back, tight-jawed. She was in 3C, but she didn't look like... She stopped herself. bit the inside of her cheek. Gerald stared at her. "You didn't check her documents?" "I thought you thought wrong," he cut in, then lowered his voice. "You might have just messed with the wrong one." Back in 3C, Renee swiped open another tab. The email from her assistant Monica was waiting. Subject, stakeholders online. Body, all 6 are in the secure room. They saw the incident. We're recording everything. Status, awaiting your word. She read it, deleted it, opened a clean draft, then paused. Mark in 3D finally leaned over, voice low but polite. "Rough morning, huh?" Renee turned to look at him slowly. "Not hostile, just assessing," he added quickly. "You're handling it well. Most people would have caused a scene." She smiled. "The faintest thing?" "Maybe," she said. "They would have deserved to." He blinked, nodded once, then turned his head back toward the window. Behind them, Lila whispered to her live stream again. "She hasn't said more than 3 full sentences since sitting down, but everyone's acting different now. It's like they feel it. Like she's a problem they didn't see coming." The flight crew began to do final cabin checks, but no one approached Renee again. When Olivia passed 3C on her way forward, her gaze flicked toward Renee's face for half a second, and Renee was already looking at her. Just one glance. But Olivia stopped walking, literally stopped, as if her body recognized something her brain hadn't caught up to yet. And for a single flickering instant, Olivia took a step back, not physically, but in posture, in presence. She looked away. Renee didn't move. She simply opened a new screen on her phone. All stakeholders online. Confirm when ready. She typed one line. "Not yet. Let them finish boarding. Let them watch." Then she closed her phone, folded her hands, and waited. The plane hadn't moved an inch, but in that cabin, power had already changed seat. Flight 182815, IE Memum. Doors closing. A soft chime sounded overhead. "This is your purser Gerald speaking. We've completed boarding for Flight 1820 with non-stop service to San Francisco. We'll be pushing back from the gate shortly, so please ensure all carry-on items are stowed and devices are in airplane mode." The cabin stirred. The usual rustle of seat belts, overhead bins slamming shut, small talk resumed in low, polite hums. But not in row 3. In 3C, Renee hadn't moved. She sat with the same stillness she had when Olivia had questioned her, hands folded in her lap, eyes straight ahead, calm as sky before thunder. Then, without warning, her phone buzzed again, not loud, not long, just one short pulse. She didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, she turned her wrist slightly to check her watch. Black face, leather strap, gold trim. Simple, elegant, and unmistakably Patek Philippe. 3D noticed, so did Olivia, though she quickly looked away. Renee finally slid the phone from the seat pocket. Unlocked. One unread message. From Monica Gates. Subject, confirmation. Body, board is watching. Command channel open. All are waiting. She stared at it for a full 5 seconds. Then reached into her pocket and pulled out a pair of white AirPods. She placed one in her left ear, the other in her right, and said, barely above a whisper, "Go ahead." There was a soft beep. Then a voice, smooth and clear, came through her ear. Female, low-toned, precise. "Renee, we're all watching. Protocol Q is active. What are your instructions?" Renee leaned her head back against the seat, eyes still forward, passengers all around her unaware, except for Lila in 5A still watching, still recording. "Activate Protocol R3, Renee said quietly. "I'll handle the public interface myself." A pause. Then the voice replied, "Understood. Comms locked. Stream mirror on. Statement draft en route." Renee closed her eyes for a moment, then tapped the button on her armrest to turn on the in-flight screen. The monitor lit up. default airline menu. But something strange flickered. The welcome animation froze and it went black. Then white text appeared briefly. Flight hold, pending ground confirmation. The man in 2D frowned. So did someone across the aisle. "Is that normal?" he asked aloud. No one answered, because one by one the screens across business class were showing the same thing. Flight hold, waiting clearance, please remain seated. In the galley, Gerald's radio crackled. He stepped away quickly. Back in 3C, Renee's phone lit up again. Text from Monica. "Camera crew is in position. We're picking up your mic. Statement can go live at your signal." Renee didn't type back. She didn't need to. She just exhaled once, deep and slow. And for the first time allowed a faint smile to lift one corner of her mouth. Row by row, passengers were noticing something strange. The engines hadn't started. The pilot hadn't spoken, and yet a woman in 3C sat in perfect silence, as if the entire airline was holding its breath, waiting on her. Flight 1820, 8:21 a.m. Gerald returned with his hands clasped politely in front of him. He leaned toward Renee's seat, his voice hushed but careful. "Collins, is there something I can assist you with personally?" She didn't look at him right away. She was reading not an email, not a text, but a document filled with lines of financial graphs and bullet points that didn't belong on any typical passenger's screen. Then slowly she turned her head. "I'd like to speak with someone who has final authority at this terminal." Gerald blinked. "At the terminal?" "Yes, I can contact our gate supervisor. Renee held up one finger, gently interrupting. "I didn't say I wanted someone with a title. I said someone with final authority." There was no malice in her voice, no sharpness, but Gerald stepped back like he'd been touched by static. "I'll see what I can do." He walked off quickly. From across the aisle, Olivia watched. She was trying to rearrange cups in the galley, but her hands were too tight, too fast. Ice clattered, water sloshed. She didn't look over again, but she heard everything. Back in 3C, Renee's phone lit again. "Monica, terminal control is in holding pattern. Gate supervisor inbound. Legal is mirroring audio. Confirm escalation capture?" Renee didn't reply. She whispered instead, just to herself. Or maybe to the air. Let them walk into their own silence. Then she opened her tablet. The screen displayed a dashboard most people never saw outside of Fortune 100 boardrooms. Equity influence mapping, transportation sector, Collins Equity Group, 14.6% stake, Western Air Holdings, direct voting power, FAA Partnership Board Tier 2. She didn't touch it, just left it on the tray, visible like a warning sign in plain daylight. Footsteps echoed down the jet bridge. Raymond Pierce entered the cabin, clipboard in hand, walkie clip to his belt. He scanned the room, clearly expecting something small, a seating dispute, a baggage complaint. Gerald met him by row 2 and gestured quietly. "That's her," Gerald said. Raymond nodded. He approached carefully, formal, controlled. "Ma'am," he began, "we've been told you requested to speak with a supervisor." Renee turned in her seat. Her face was composed, unreadable. "I didn't," she said calmly. Raymond blinked. I'm sorry?" "I requested," she said again, slow and deliberate, "to speak with someone capable." Silence. Somewhere in row 4, someone sucked in a quiet breath. Gerald looked down at the floor. Raymond tried to recover. "Ma'am, I assure you I'm here to help." But Renee had already rotated her tablet. She didn't say a word. The screen now faced him fully. At the top, a digital seal, Collins Equity Group. Below that, a graph, a list of holdings. Western Air Holdings, 14.6% stake. Collins Board Tier 2 Clearance, FAA Alignment Committee, and, at the bottom, shareholder class, veto capable. Raymond's mouth opened, then closed. He wiped his palm discreetly down the side of his slacks. Renee didn't blink. Behind her, Lila whispered into her phone again. "I don't know what that screen says exactly, but whatever it is, he's sweating." Raymond cleared his throat. I'll notify Central right away." Renee finally smiled. Polite, reserved. "Take your time," she said. "I'm not the one delaying this flight." Raymond didn't respond. He turned, walked back up the aisle, stiff, robotic, and disappeared through the curtain. And still, Renee didn't move. Didn't gloat. Didn't flinch. She simply turned her screen back toward herself and began preparing the statement. Flight 1820, 1827. I am 'em. The whispers had changed. They weren't gossip anymore. They were questions no one dared to finish. Wait, what does Collins? Did she just show a shareholder? She's not just on the board, she is the board. Cabin lights dimmed slightly as the door to the flight deck closed again. No announcements, no flight attendant call tones, just the low, soft buzz of things rearranging themselves. The sound of people realizing they were wrong. Olivia hadn't been seen for nearly 4 minutes. When she finally emerged from behind the blue curtain near the front galley, her hair wasn't as neat, her eyes darted toward row 3, then away, fast. She didn't speak to anyone. She started collecting half-used coffee cups from rows 1 and 2. Her hand shook when she reached over a tray table. The man in 2A leaned back and whispered to his seatmate, "They said she owns a stake in the airline group. Like real stake." "Who told you that?" "Internet. Twitter's all over it already." They pulled up filings. Further back, a young man in cargo pants was glued to his phone. He's CEO of Collins Equity. Net worth not listed, but their assets under management are over $38 billion. 0 cents. A pause. Then, "Damn." Lila Monroe, still in 5A, angled her camera discreetly. Her live stream was now over 2,400 viewers. The chat was flying. "She's so calm, it's terrifying." White folks shook. "We watching a corporate homicide in real time." Someone give her a crown and a coffee. Lila whispered, "Y'all, Olivia just came out looking like she got called to the principal's office, and Renee still hasn't moved." And it was true. 3C hadn't shifted, not 1 inch. Renee sat with her tablet now resting flat on her lap. Her eyes occasionally flicked across the screen, but she didn't type, didn't talk. She let the energy reshape itself around her. Across the aisle, a male flight attendant tried to pour a glass of orange juice. He missed the cup entirely. No one laughed. There was nothing funny about this anymore. In the galley, Gerald spoke into his headset again. Short bursts. "No." She said, final authority. "No." She didn't raise her voice once. "No, no threats." A pause. She showed him holdings data. Another pause. She hasn't asked for anything else. That's what's freaking people out. A woman in 1B asked Olivia quietly, "Is everything all right?" Olivia didn't answer. Instead, she walked away and gripped the handle of the overhead compartment tight enough that her knuckles paled. The cabin fell into a strange hush, the kind where every click of a buckle, every tap of a phone screen, every whisper sounded too loud. And amid it all, seat 3C held steady. Renee hadn't raised her voice, hadn't stood, hadn't demanded, and yet the silence belonged to her. The authority didn't sit in the pilot's cockpit or in the galley or on the gate supervisor's clipboard. It sat right there, still, composed, radiating without effort. Someone sneezed near row 6. No one said, "Bless you." The noise had become something else now. Not voices, not confrontation, just tension humming in the walls, waiting to break. And in the middle of it all, Renee checked her watch. Right on time. Flight 1820. 833. IM. Monica, 12 minutes past. Confirm protocol execution? Renee didn't type anything back. She just whispered one word into her AirPods. Proceed. Then she closed the message. The screen dimmed. The hum of the aircraft's ventilation system filled the silence, and across the aisle, Gerald's headset chirped. He paused, tilted his head slightly, then walked briskly toward the front galley. The curtain rustled behind him. Muffled voices, nothing distinct until a second figure stepped onto the plane. Black suit, crisp clipboard, no name tag. He walked with the kind of posture that made the pilots peek out from the cockpit to see what was happening. He didn't look around, didn't nod at anyone. He walked straight down the aisle to the galley. To Olivia, she turned, startled, and the look on her face said it all. Her cheeks flushed, then faded. He leaned in and whispered, just 2 sentences. Only those closest heard him. Olivia froze. Then her eyes darted not to Renee but to the forward door, as if searching for an exit that wasn't there. The man in the suit handed her a small white envelope, thin, unmarked, corporate. She took it with trembling fingers, her lips parted but no words came out. He stepped aside and waited. No one in the cabin moved. No one spoke. Passengers watched through parted fingers, through screens barely recording, through breaths held too long. Olivia stood still for several seconds, then folded the envelope under one hand, turned toward Gerald, and nodded. Just once. Gerald didn't ask questions. He moved to open the cabin door. Olivia walked past row 1. Then row 2. When she reached 3C, she slowed instinctively. But Renee didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her, didn't shift in her seat, just sat, straight, calm, unshaken. Olivia's mouth twitched, a word that never formed. Her jaw moved slightly like she might say sorry, but Renee didn't need it. And Olivia seemed to know that too, so she kept walking and stepped off the plane. Someone in 4C exhaled, loudly. Gerald returned to his station, where another flight attendant was staring. "What just happened?" the attendant whispered. Gerald replied under his breath. "Corporate pulled her off mid-rotation." "Who called it?" Gerald glanced toward 3C, then said, "It came from the top." A pause. "The real top." In 5A, Lila flipped her phone's camera to face herself. Her eyes were wide, her mouth half open in disbelief. "She gone," she whispered. "Y'all, she really just got fired." From C3C, her live stream chat exploded. "Ain't no way. Queen behavior. This the coldest flex I've ever seen. This needs to be a movie." Lila looked toward Renee. "She hasn't said a word in 15 minutes, she whispered. "And still, she moved an entire system." Renee reached for her AirPods, slid them into their case, closed it with a soft click, then folded her tablet and smiled. Not wide, not smug, just enough to say, "This part's done." Flight 1820, 8:39 IMS Collins, may I confirm your full title for Central Records? Gerald's voice wasn't nervous. It was reverent. The shift had taken full root now. The same man who once offered juice with a smile now stood with his hands folded in front of him, careful not to make eye contact too long, not to speak out of turn. Renee didn't answer right away. She turned her tablet and slowly, deliberately rotated the screen toward him. The display was crystal clear. Renee Collins, chairwoman and founder, Collins Equity Group, Executive Authority, Global Holdings Division, Voting Seat Tier 1 Strategic Oversight Board, Western Air Holdings. Gerald didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He just reached to his headset, pulled it slightly from his ear and muttered, "You need to see this yourself." 2 minutes later, Raymond stepped back onto the aircraft, but this time he didn't have a clipboard, no walkie in hand. He walked slowly, carefully, shoulders lowered, expression blank. He reached row 3 and nodded gently. "Ms. Collins," he said, we deeply regret the earlier misunderstanding." Renee looked up at him. Not with anger, not even offense. Just clarity. "Let's clarify what it was," she said, voice even. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a misjudgment." Raymond swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." She reached into the seat pocket and retrieved a black leather folder, opened it, pulled out a single-page printout. Laser crisp, logo stamped at the top. She handed it to him. He glanced at the heading. Collins Equity Group, Holdings Disclosure, Strategic Control Positions, Transportation Sector. Then his eyes scanned the highlighted line. Western Air Holdings, 11.4% equity stake. Direct board influence, executive oversight panel, compliance veto power, level B4. He read it twice, then lowered the page and said nothing, because what could he say? Behind him, Gerald stood motionless. His headset dangled slightly off his shoulder. Even Lila, now with nearly 4,000 viewers on her stream, couldn't speak for a moment. The live chat was exploding. "Ain't no way. She owns them. They kicked off their boss's boss's boss. That's not a passenger, that's a system reset in heels." Renee leaned back, looked at Raymond once more. "Tell me," she said, soft, "how many incidents like this do you think happen to women who don't have folders like mine?" He didn't answer. She didn't wait. She opened a second folder, this one marked Operational Discrepancies. Flipped to a photo of Olivia Hunt, 2 previous incident notes attached, both unresolved. "I'm not here because I want a scene," she said. "I'm here because I intend to make sure scenes like this stop happening." Raymond nodded slowly, shakily. "Yes, Miss Collins." "Of course." She turned her tablet back toward herself, closed the folder, folded her hands. And that was that. Flight 1820, 8:45 IMM. They thought it was over. They thought the silence meant closure. But it wasn't silence. It was the eye of something much larger. And it was about to move again. Raymond had barely made it back to the gate when his earpiece buzzed. 3 short tones. Internal escalation alert. His face dropped. He picked up the line. "Yes?" A voice clipped, corporate. "Immediate directive. Miss Collins has authorized internal audit of cabin crew conduct. Level 2 override. You are instructed to remain available for coordination." Raymond closed his eyes. The audit was live, and it was coming from seat 3C. Inside the aircraft, Renee tapped her screen 3 times. "Internal action log, Collins Unnul," she whispered, "begin." Instantly, Monica's voice returned in her AirPods. "Recording active. Audit session initiated. Executive signal verified." In the cabin, nothing changed for the untrained eye. But the crew's posture shifted again. Gerald checked his headset. A new signal flashed. Something they weren't trained for. A tiny red dot in the corner of his screen. Audit mode, live observation. His hand trembled as he adjusted his tie. Lila caught it. Her live stream whispered, "Oh my God!" Something else just started. Then came the first command, a chime in the galley, followed by a message on their tablet. Request, submit procedural report, cabin class handling, flight 1820. Gerald's eyes widened. That's not from flight control. Another chime. Olivia's name appeared, crossed out. Terminated, mid-rotation, supervisor note pending, and then supervisor reassignment queue open. Review in progress. In the gate office, Raymond watched a screen update in real time. Names, roles, incident reports. A new file populated. Suggested policy revisions, passenger escalation protocols. It wasn't written by legal. It was authored by R. Collins. With one click it was marked, urgent, governance level discussion. Back on the plane, Renee folded her tablet again, crossed one leg over the other. She wasn't issuing orders now. She was letting the machine she'd built run itself. One row behind her, someone whispered to a seatmate, "Why aren't they doing anything to stop her?" Another voice answered, "Because she is the stop." A ripple moved down the cabin, not loud, not chaotic, but undeniable. One by one, passengers understood. This wasn't about one woman being wronged. It was about the system being reprogrammed from the inside. And still, Renee hadn't said another word, because she didn't need to. She had the code. She had the keys. And now, she had their attention. Flight 1820, 8:52 IMM Monica. All terminals have received the reform draft. It's been flagged crisis level, push initiated, all clearance codes verified. Renee didn't blink. She opened the file herself, not to edit but to witness. Passenger Equity Enforcement Protection issued. Collins Equity Group Authority Tier 1 Oversight. In-flight situational response. Clause 1.2. All discriminatory removals or attempted removals shall be subject to immediate review. Clause 3.7. Any seating dispute involving racial profiling must trigger intervention within 15 minutes. Clause 5.1. Supervisors who fail to document escalation chains shall be subject to audit. She tapped confirm. The system pushed globally, not with noise, with precision. Across the country, in an office overlooking the Hudson, a policy analyst choked on her coffee. "Wait, is this live?" Her supervisor walked in, scanning the same memo. "It's Collins," he said flatly. "It's already in the system." In another time zone, a VP of compliance at Western Air Holdings leaned back from his monitor. His assistant looked up. "Sir," he exhaled slowly. "She did it." Back inside Flight 1820, Gerald's handheld screen lit up again. Update. Received procedural protocol update. Status. Effective. Immediately. Instruction. All seating escalations must now follow PEEP Clause 3.7. Supervisor override. Temporarily disabled. Gerald blinked. "Read it again." Then glanced at 3C. The woman who hadn't raised her voice once. He stepped forward. Not rushed, not shaken, but like a man correcting posture before addressing royalty. He stopped at her seat, bowed his head gently. "Miss Collins," he said, voice quieter now, "may I offer you a warm towel and beverage of your choice?" Renee glanced at him, calm, unfazed. "Sparkling water," she said. "No ice." He nodded and walked away. The request wasn't an indulgence, it was a marker of new order. In the cockpit, the pilot received a final ping. Central authorization, delay resolved, flight cleared. Cause of delay, resolved per executive equity audit. Authority trigger, Collins protocol. He leaned back, whistled. From her seat, Renee slowly fastened her belt. Behind her, Lila whispered to the live stream, "She rewrote the rule book on a plane before takeoff." The live chat went wild. She just made history from row 3. Black women fixing entire industries mid-slight. "I'll never complain about boarding again. I'll just channel Renee Collins." And then the final moment. Renee glanced out the window. Calm skies, a stretch of tarmac ahead. Nothing blocking takeoff now. She didn't speak to anyone. She just said to herself, barely audible, "Now, we can take off." Flight 1820 9:01 IM. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the captain's voice over the speakers, "thank you for your patience. We are now cleared for takeoff." No one clapped. No one cheered. But not a single passenger moved either. Not a cough, not a question, not a complaint. The aircraft lifted off like it was carrying something holy. 30,000 feet above the world, and back on the ground, it had already begun. Headline: Breaking, Black CEO rewrites airline policy from Seat 3C. Subhead: Power move. Airline staffer fired, protocols overhauled mid-flight. In an office in Atlanta, a senior attorney put down his mug. "She did it," he whispered. "She really did it." In Chicago, O'Hare, a young flight attendant on break, pulled out her phone. Saw the clip of Renee sitting silent while Olivia was escorted out. She didn't smile. She cried and whispered to no one. "We needed this." In Los Angeles, a little black girl sat on her dad's lap as he held up a tablet. They watched the moment Renee folded her arms, didn't speak, and changed everything. "You see her, baby?" he said. "That's how you fight without shouting." Within hours, the following happened. Delta released a statement. "We are reviewing our passenger de-escalation policies in light of recent events." United followed. "All staff will undergo new anti-bias simulation scenarios effective this quarter." One executive at JetBlue privately called it the Collins Clause. Online, the term Seat 3C became a shorthand, not just for a seat, for a moment, a movement. TikTok was flooded with stitched videos. "This one's for 3C. She never raised her voice, and still, she shook the room." New life rule. What would Renee do? Thousands of women, especially older black women, shared videos of quiet moments where they stood their ground, with the caption "Seat 3C. And Renee? She gave no interviews, no press conferences, no victory laps, no photo ops. She didn't need to. The plane touched down, the doors opened, and she walked through the terminal like any other woman. Alone. Bag in hand, no entourage, no camera crew, just grace, wrapped in velvet steel. Someone recognized her. They opened their mouth, hand halfway raised, but they stopped. Because you don't interrupt storms when they walk. You let them pass and pray they never need to come back. Outside, a black car waited, no license plate seen, no logos. Renee stepped in, looked once more at the sky she'd just come down from, then turned to the window. Her reflection in the glass was steady, still, and she said quietly, "One flight, one clause, one less excuse." 6 months later, there's no plaque, no commemorative seat, no framed photo at Gate B7. But across terminals nationwide, something had changed, and it wasn't the furniture. At Newark Liberty, an older black woman boards business class. No one stops her. No one questions the barcode on her phone. She walks past row 3, pauses, smiles, and chooses 3C just because. In an employee training room at Hartsfield-Jackson, the lights dim. A young woman in uniform watches the simulation. A scenario plays out, a conflict over boarding. But this time, the protocol doesn't escalate. The flight attendant listens, de-escalates, chooses empathy. The screen fades to black. Text appears, inspired by the Renee Collins protocol. Active nationwide since 2025. The trainees shift in their seats, not because they're uncomfortable, but because they're awake now. A think piece makes its rounds. She changed nothing with speeches. She changed everything by refusing to move. Another article lists her among the year's most influential women, but they spelled her name wrong. She didn't correct it. Because she wasn't chasing recognition. She was changing what deserved it. A college student in Memphis writes an essay titled, "The Power of Stillness. Lessons from C3C." She prints it out for her grandmother. Her grandmother reads the first page and says nothing. But the next day, she boards a bus, back straight, head high, no explanation needed. And as for Renee, she kept her calendar closed to interviews. She returned to work. She sat on 5 more boards. She opened a scholarship fund, anonymous donor. But sometimes when flying, she'd request 3C. Never for attention, only because it reminded her of what happens when you stop asking permission to exist. And in the air, somewhere between gates, between clouds, between questions no longer asked, the world turned slightly more just. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to say, a woman sat down and history stood up. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you're still listening right now, then I know you felt it. The power of stillness, the power of knowing who you are, even when the world tries to forget. Renee Collins didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a scene. She made a statement. And when systems underestimate Black women, they forget sometimes the most graceful ones hold the highest keys. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about changing what we settle for, rewriting the rules from row 3. So if this story moved you, I invite you to leave a comment. Tell me how it made you feel. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this, they're not just meant to be heard, they're meant to live on.